joining us today.
Very happy to be here.
Israel's restraint policy. The country has earned widespread respect from the United States, from other countries for maintaining this policy. It has earned support amongst the population, and yet there are some rumblings within the government that this policy may be harming Israel's deterrent capability, that the Arabs are now perceiving Israel as a passive country that is bowing to U.S. pressure. Are you concerned about that new image that Israel has achieved?
No, I'm not concerned at all, because basically I don't believe that there's anybody in the world today, and particularly our Arab neighbors, that does not believe that we have the capability to react, that we have if given the conditions, we have the desire to react, and that we have, that our armed forces have the necessary courage and ability to react. In other words, from this point of view, I think we've emerged from the past, and here we're a country that can carry out an Entebbe, can carry out any other operation that it wishes to carry out if it decides that that's the policy. The question is deciding on the policy. And here the government faces problems because this is a war basically between the coalition and Iraq. We are linked to the Americans, we are coordinated to a degree with them, and the last thing we want to do is cause them any problems. As the Vice Chief of Staff pointed out recently, we have either to coordinate with them or at least to notify them. Now, in addition, when you talk about reacting, you say reacting to what? In the first 10 days of the war, we suffered 25 Scud attacks with casualties and damage and so forth. In the last 8 days, we've had 4 or 5 Scud attacks with no damage whatsoever. In other words, this indicates that the Scud ability, if you like to call it, of the Iraqis is diminishing. The same is true of the situation in Saudi Arabia and Dhahran, and therefore any pressure that there might have been from a public point of view has diminished considerably. So we have to take into consideration all these considered problems. What this would do to the coalition, how it might affect it, what the cost would be, and so forth, and what in fact damage is being sustained by us at this point. And from this point of view, I think that on this basis the government has to make its decisions.
Yesterday, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Army said that the plans are in place to attack those remaining missile launchers, that there are military people who are just itching to get their hands on them. How long do you think Israel can continue to absorb these blows? How long can the country's nightly routine be affected so dramatically that people have to stay in their homes?
Well, you know as well as I do that the nightly routine has been less affected in the last week or so. I think life is much easier. I take my nightly walk in the streets of Jerusalem and don't let Saddam Hussein disturb me. And I don't think, from the point of view of public opinion, and that's a very important gauge, you see yourself that approximately 70% of the country do not feel that the situation has reached a stage where we have to react. But here, as I say, there are aspects that the government has to take into consideration.
On another issue, sir, Israel's nuclear capability. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney said yesterday that by launching chemical weapons against Israel, Saddam Hussein is risking the possibility that Israel would respond with nuclear weapons. Is that a possibility?
I don't quite understand what Secretary Cheney was getting at, because I would suggest that this question be directed to him. After all, he made the statement, and not any Israeli. Our policy has been and continues to be that we will not be the first country to introduce this terrifying weapon into the Middle East, and we stick by that. Perhaps Secretary Cheney was referring to U.S. capabilities, but I would not relate it to any intention on the part of Israel.
Iraq in the past week has not been as effective in getting missiles into densely populated areas in Israel. Any speculation about why the missiles have landed in the West Bank?
Well, obviously, first of all, they've been using up their missiles. Secondly, they've been using up their launchers. Thirdly, the United States Air Force and the British have been dealing much more effectively with them, particularly with the launchers. And it seems to me that their desire to affect us, to hurt us, is there. It hasn't changed. So if they're not doing it, it means that it's very difficult for them to do it. And as I say, in the last 8 days, we've seen 4 or 5 Scuds landing here completely ineffectively and causing no damage whatsoever. So I would say that they've got problems.
And the mood? How would you describe the mood now, 2.5 weeks since those missile attacks first started?
I've been through all the wars that we've had here in Israel, and I can say that we're no better and no worse in the mood than we were in the past. We always pulled through. The public we are now inundated with missions from abroad, with people visiting from abroad, and they themselves cannot credit the mood today. The mood is good, and I can tell you that as I move around the population and visit everybody, including those who've suffered, I'm very, very proud to be head of this state.
President Chaim Herzog, thank you, sir, for joining us.